James Franklin, in the last 42 games that he has coached, his team's record is 34-8. They just canned him on Sunday. 34-8. Now, I have been trying to figure out where exactly to begin on this. I know where I ultimately want to land on this. So when this happens, I talked to Spencer, and Spencer is explaining to me some of the outright coaching calamities that Penn State had in the last 3 games, these games that got Franklin fired. Okay. Now, for those of you who don't pay but so much attention to Penn State or pay attention to college football in general, you may be thinking to yourself, hey, I heard people thought that Penn State was going to win the national championship to start the year. You are correct. You may have even heard people say, hey, I thought I heard that Penn State could win the national championship 2.5 weeks ago. You would also be correct. You may remember people being like, well, damn, they lost at home in overtime to a top 5 team. I mean, they can still pull it together, right? And you may be like, damn, I feel like that was 14 days ago. You would be correct. And I've never seen anybody get themselves fired faster than this. Like, you have examples, and I talk about this all the time, legendarily, when Arkansas fired Jack Crow because they lost to the Citadel, and they fired his ass on Sunday. I've talked about that before. I feel like this, what happened here is in a similar class, but in a different one. Franklin's problem is, and I mentioned that 34-8, and we talk about this on the show a lot. A couple weeks ago, we talked about it on the show, and I made the point that, in fact, it was last week, I think. Franklin's in that zone where it is more interesting when his team loses than it ever is when they win. By the way, I also said that about Deion Sanders, and they got a win over a ranked opponent over the weekend. And somehow I don't see my people marching in the streets and wearing red, black, and green like they was 2 years ago. Ugh, it's weird. But anyway, Franklin got into that zone. And so you can put anybody's record up in college football, but because of the variance in what every game in college football is and what every game in college football means, it's not just about how many games you win, it's about who you beat. It's not just about how many games you lose, it's about who beats you. Franklin had gotten very, very deep into the zone. By the way, so far out of small sample that he was about to be in legitimate N is greater than 30 large sample on having a terrible record against top 10 opponents. I want to say it's 4-20 or 4-21. It's something in that zone. It's not hyperbole what I just gave you. It's that bad. It's not just the games you win and not just the games you lose. It's who it happens against.
4-21 against AP top 10 opponents and 1-18 against top 10 opponents in the Big Ten.
It can't be that, right? Now, does that mean you shit-canned your coach in the middle of the year? Like, Ryan, you were around when LSU did this to Les Miles.
Correct.
But what was different, and you correct me if I'm wrong here on that season, they were set to fire Les the year before, and then there was this weird populist uprising
in the middle of the game.
And then they won a game against Texas A&M.
Yeah.
And everybody got sentimental about it. And then they said, oh, okay, we'll bring Les back. And then you went out the next year, you lost at Lambeau Field and a couple more, and then it was just like, oh, okay, this is
He got fired at 2-2.
Yes. Now, they waited till the end of the year to fire Orgeron, right?
They told him in the middle of the year that this was your last year. He got it like a kind of like a grace period, like, hey, buddy, you got to go.
Yeah, but he got the rest of the year.
Correct.
There were reports that Ed Orgeron was bringing his girlfriends and their children to practice.
Yes.
There was a report that Ed Orgeron accidentally tried to spit game to the wife of a member of the board at Circle K in the parking lot.
Correct.
I don't know if it was exactly Circle K, but I like to imagine that it was.
It was emotionally a Circle K.
Yes. By the way, did you know they have Circle Ks in Vietnam?
No, I did not. That's a travel show I would watch.
Circle K is deep in.
I didn't realize the brand was that strong.
Right, I'm out here like.
Do they have Piggly Wiggly too?
Well. So the thing about Asia is intellectual property is but a notion.
Got it. Okay.
Over there, copyright infringement is wild, but I looked it up as I recall, and it's actually a Circle K. But anyway, I've never heard of somebody getting fired like this at this time, because what does it serve? And that's before we get to the $50 million buyout. Now, this is what I am taking also from the fact that they shook Cam Franklin with this many games left. They were still in the running to get to the playoff 2 weeks ago. They suffered not one, but two inexcusable losses back to back. I have to assume that something happened, right? This doesn't make any sense. Like, I want to be clear about this. People get fired because somebody wants to fire them. That's always the reason. No matter who it is, no matter what it is. People get fired because somebody wants to fire them. And clearly, people wanted to fire Franklin. I don't know how well he got along with the people that make decisions there. I don't really have a great handle on his relationship with the fans. I do know that Penn State, I don't know exactly how good Penn State fans believe they should actually be. But every now and then, they should beat Ohio State and Michigan. Well, at least when those two schools are good. You know what I mean? Like, every now and then, they should do that. It should not be a clear tier below. So I was talking to my buddy, Alan Kinney, who covers Oklahoma sports. And we were talking about the Gary Gibbs era of OU football, which none of you really remember too well. But back when the NCAA did stuff like, say, you couldn't go on TV for a year and cut your scholarships to like 15, and wouldn't let you go to bowl games and all kinds of stuff like that. They put the hurt to Oklahoma. Really put the hurt to Oklahoma. Barry Switzer had to quit, and Gary Gibbs had the job for like 5 or 6 years, and it wasn't a bad tenure. It was an okay tenure considering the circumstances, and it gets forgotten that it was actually an okay tenure considering the circumstances. The problem was he couldn't beat Colorado and he couldn't beat Nebraska. Those 9 wins you got don't matter that much if you can't ever beat those people. Ever. Like, Ryan, I think you'd agree with me. The thing that really got Les Miles fired was losing to Alabama 5 years in a row.
It might have been more than that. Yeah, I think it was 5 or 6.
It was 4 years in a row, but it was 5 games.
Yes.
Because the first one was the national championship game.
Yeah.
Where
they couldn't cross the midfield.
Yeah, I know you don't want to talk about it. It's okay.
I was there.
Yeah, it's fine. That's right. I keep forgetting that was at the Superdome. So you guys were just all there.
We were all there. Yeah.
Sorry.
We were all there. And you remember, they won in 2003.
Yes, and they won in 2007.
Both in New Orleans.
Yes, they were.
So people were prepared to be happy.
Yes.
And they were not happy.
LSU quietly had a Miami Hurricanes run where it becomes easier to win national championships when you play the championship game at the crib.
Yeah.
Neither here nor there, though. But yeah, so you got to win those every now and then. Like, I think a great example of this, again, this is the topic I love so much, which is like the relativity of college football. Everybody talks about how great a rivalry Auburn-Alabama is, and it's just great because those people are crazy. But these are not schools of equal footing. They're not. And I think Auburn fans understand that. I think they get that. But what you need, here's what can't happen at Auburn. You can't have multiple cycles where players stay there for 4 years and never beat Alabama. You see what I mean? It can't be that. You got to get one every three to 4 years, right? You got to be able to say you did something like that. At Penn State, when you're talking about Ohio State and Michigan, getting one out of the two of those has got to be a little bit more frequent than that. And on top of it, Penn State is a tier below Ohio State and always be. Like Penn State is not a tier one. They're a tier below Ohio State. But if you were to try to ask me to explain why it is that Penn State shouldn't be better than Michigan, and by the way, right now they probably are better than Michigan, but there's no argument for why they cannot be consistently better than Michigan. And there's no argument for why it is that they should not try to find a coach that puts them in a position where that happens. You see what I mean? Like, those are the questions that programs have to ask themselves. And it's in part because all of this is just about vibes, man. Like, maybe Penn State fans think they're supposed to be winning national championships every year. I don't think they're that stupid, but perhaps it is possible that that's what it is. But the legacy of Penn State football is not built on their time in the Big Ten. It's built on their time as an independent. They've been in the Big Ten now for over 30 years. They've won the Big Ten something like 30 times. I mean, 3 times. Ooh, 30, that would be amazing. They've won it something like 3 or 4 times. Like, they're not that. But you can't do 2 inexcusable losses in a row and assume you're going to keep your job. If they wanted him to still be the coach, he would still be the coach, right? But one thing about taking an inexcusable loss immediately after an inexcusable loss, come on, man, that's tough on the people. I remember when Texas had to decide to get rid of Charlie Strong. Charlie Strong had an inexcusable loss at Kansas, and they didn't fire him. And then they came out on Thanksgiving and got beat by a zillion points at home by, I think it was TCU. You can't do 2 inexcusable losses in a row. I just thought a $50 million buyout would insulate you in times like those. And buddy, I was wrong. I don't know who the Penn State money is. Like, that's another fun game in college football is where exactly does your money come from? Who makes these money decisions? Do you have one specific money man? I don't really know how it works at Penn State when it comes to all those things. But there are 2 ways to look at this. Either one, losing at home to Northwestern was so abominable that they were like, we're going to fire him and then we're going to figure out the money from there. Or number 2, some people have made it known for a while, just say the word. We got the 50, just say the word.
I also think it's instructive that the same day that Penn State has an unexcusable loss, Indiana goes to Autzen and beats Oregon. And I think those things are related.
We're going to put a pin in that one because that's also the most fun part about this. They just rounded up 50. Remember when the NCAA tried to tear down Penn State's program because they believed the program turned an eye to a legacy of child molestation? You remember that? The big thing they tried to express was we need to tear down a culture in the world and an idea that football matters more than anything in the world, basically. And they did this whole spiel about that. That was in 2012 that they did this, okay? It's 2025, and they are paying somebody $50 million not to work there anymore. Guys, I don't think that worked. I've also been reading things where people give the indication that Penn State is all on board with the private equity push in the Big Ten. Like, all of these things are going on at one time. Now do you see why me and Ryan could have talked about this for an hour? I could do a whole show about this because there's so many different things.
We haven't gotten to the comparisons to Jimbo, who the next coach is.
We don't know any of that.
Yeah.
There's no time to get to that part. We haven't gotten to how good Penn State should actually be.
Yeah.
Like I started talking about that and then wound up on something else because I don't have they finished in the top 10 5 times in the last 10 years.
They lost by a field goal in the semifinal, yes. 10 months ago?
10 months ago. They just lost in overtime in Oregon just a minute ago. And the coach just lost his job. And by the way, a defensible move. It's just crazy because it costs $50 million. So, yeah, maybe they need that private equity influx so they can go ahead and do this. There also has to be a bunch of other coaches shitting bricks right now Because if somebody will pay $50 million to get that guy out of there, how serious are you about football? I don't know if you guys remember this. When Florida State fired Willie Taggart, I want to say it was in the middle of his second year, which was the fastest that I recalled anybody under those circumstances getting fired, which raised all kinds of questions about whether or not you did that because, well, basically, clearly it hadn't happened to no white people because it hadn't happened to nobody, right? But if you watch Willie Taggart, Florida State Seminole football, oh boy, they looked like they needed to fire the coach. It had just never happened before. You see what I mean? It wasn't like, it was understandable. You guys, if you listen to me for a while, you know I say anybody can get fired for any reason. But it just never happened before. I want to say the week after, maybe 2 weeks after, Chad Morris was in the second season of a disastrous stint at Arkansas, and they lost at home 45-19 to Western Kentucky, and they fired that man the next day. Like, once the precedent had been set, Arkansas was like, all right, cool, we gonna go ahead and get his ass out of here. It's got to be a bunch of people that's shitting bricks right now. If they put together the 50 to get that dude out of there, and we don't even know what they money be hitting on, hey, Mike Norvell, you might want to get your shit together down there at Florida State.
Luke Fickell.
Oh, I think he's done in that town.
Yeah.
All you people need to really get this going. Now, what will be funny is Mike Locksley also is on that list because his replacement just became available. My guy Joe Giglio in North Carolina says that Franklin has offset language in his contract. So if he gets another coaching job, then boom, it decreases what Penn State owes him. And all I'm saying is nobody wants Mike Locksley to get fired badder than Penn State does. Nobody does. Because that's the job he's going to. That's the job that he's going to take. But Ryan hit it where we start talking about people needing to be nervous. I believe that there's a Signetti effect in place. And you're like, gee, guys, what is a Signetti effect? Indiana didn't just go win this game against Oregon. If you watched Indiana play last year, in those two games that they lost, which were to Ohio State and to Notre Dame, they were not in the same class as those teams, right? They looked like what they were, which was a feel-good story that got some scheduling breaks because these big giant conferences is wide variance in who everybody gets to play. They had some scheduling breaks. It got them into the playoff, and they got their asses kicked. Okay, right? They went up to Oregon, and they were on par with them. Guys, I'm talking about the Indiana Hoosiers. Yeah, them.
Went to Autzen, which is, one of the toughest places to play, and they had won like 25 straight games there or something, and they looked like the same football team. This was not a gimmicky win by any stretch. Like, they might have had the better quarterback, and they might have had the better offensive and defensive line.
And by the way, this is one of those long flight games, and I do think there's legitimacy to that when people bring it up. One of those long flight games.
Especially flying out of Bloomington.
Yes, they're playing this on the road, and they went in there and they punched them boys in the mouth. I remember in 2006 in the ACC, Wake Forest won the conference, okay? About half the conference turned over their coaches between that season and the next one. Because when Wake Forest, by far the smallest school in the conference, with actual real live academic stuff with their football team, if they could win the ACC, nobody had any excuses. If you look at what Duke football has become in the last 20 years, this is after Wake Forest won because suddenly Duke football had no excuses. Nobody has any excuses after Indiana gets to where they are. So we were looking at the standings to the Big Ten before this year. And before the show started, Luke Fickell, 0-3. Jeff Brom at Purdue, 0-3. Greg Schiano at Rutgers, 0-3. Jonathan Smith at Michigan State, 0-3. All of you must be shaking in your boots right now because you have no excuse. And don't think for a second that did not offer some contribution to where James Franklin is right now and where it is that he's going to be. The only question for Penn State is you can get different. And I understand why you want different. I do not know how much better you are going to get. I don't know if better is possible. Do not forget, James Franklin also won at Vanderbilt, right? Where he is bad at coaching is in ways that you can't be bad and that people saw on television. And by the way, Ryan, did you know that Northwestern is actually 4-2?
No, but here's the thing. That's one of the great things about college football is no matter what your record is, you're still your program. Like,
yes,
they're 4-2. You're still Northwestern.
Those runs where Duke, Sylvester Crew was getting everybody hired in the SEC, but also those 4 are over Western Illinois, the old UCLA, whom they only beat by 3 points, or it may have been I think it's the old UCLA that they only beat by 3 points. Louisiana Monroe, and now this one. Yeah. No. That wasn't going to be that still. They decided it didn't feel good no more, man. You understand what I'm saying? Like, it didn't feel good anymore. And once it doesn't feel good, people make changes. And what is or is not about feeling good in college sports, it really varies from school to school. So they reached the point where they just wanted something different. I just know if you set $50 million on fire, firing your coach who has won a lot of games, even if they weren't always the right ones, you better nail the next hire. I mean, nail the next hire. And by the way, in order for you to nail the next hire, it's definitely going to cost you 8 figures to get whoever that coach is to be in line with you yourselves believe that your program is. You are not in a position where you have, I think, the luxury to do what most people should do under circumstances like that at programs like these, which is to find the young up-and-comer who can have that job for 20 years. I have long contended that in the history of this sport, very few have been better at hiring coaches than Oklahoma. And what Oklahoma has gotten it right is you get a coach in the 30s and you ride that thing out. Like, you can go look all over, man. That's the formula to trying to get it right, is to find the guy that's young and in his mid-30s or early 40s, and that be your guy. Except those guys typically need a couple years to get their foot, and ain't no time for that clearly with this job, right? It's a tricky recruiting job because they call that pistol tucky. You know what I mean? I wouldn't want to go there. The glory days of this program, they haven't won a national championship in 40 years. You know what I mean? Like, what Penn State means to people my age, I don't think it's necessarily the same as it means to, like, young people. This is, and by the way, you try to come up with money and you just spent out $50 million to fire the coach. Like, you have to get this right. And the big part of why you have to get this right is you can't get it wrong. Because if you do get it wrong, you can't afford to fire this next guy. Like, you ain't just going to be able to go past the hat and get another $50 million in order to get this done. And they did it because the vibes were that bad.